If you're going to have great days, you got to take a little heat every once in a while. You've got to not be so sensitive to criticism, and you have to be able to laugh at yourself. In one of my other books, I have a quote that says, "Blessed are those who can laugh at themselves, for they will never cease to be amused." I love that, don't you? They'll never cease to be amused. We learn this a lot from our children and maybe from our grandchildren. When our youngest son was in the 7th grade, he came home from school one day and told me that the sister of a friend of his, who was a teenager, was going to get a nose job. And I said, "Really? Does she have sinus problems or breathing problems, or does she just not like the way her nose looks? What's the story?" And he said, oh Mom, it's real sad. She has a great big bump in her nose just like you. One year during the holidays, I bought a dress to wear to a holiday party, and it was a little different from what I would usually choose. And I brought it home and tried it on for my sons to see, hoping for a little positive feedback. So I put it on and walked out, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" Well, they looked at it, and then they looked at each other, kind of rolled their eyes around. And my oldest son said, "Mom, it's just too sparkly." And my youngest son said, "It's just not you." I said, "You know what? I get tired of being me. I want to be glamorous and sophisticated." And my oldest son said, "Mom, let me just put it to you this way. It's just not the right kind of a dress for a middle-aged lady who's got a lot of gray hair." Now, this was before I was chemically dependent, okay? One of my neighbors was going out to walk in the neighborhood, as she did every single morning, and it was right at that time of year when the weather was beginning to warm up, and all through the winter she had worn long pants, jeans or sweats, but on this particular day she decided to put on a pair of shorts to go out walking in the neighborhood. There is always that moment, isn't there? When you put on something that you haven't worn since this time last year. And it's always this little fleeting thought as to whether it's a good idea or not. She decided to go ahead and put on the shorts, and as she was going out the back door, her teenage son was coming in, and so she thought she might ask for a little feedback. Big mistake. She said, "Honey, do you think that my legs are just too pale and too white for me to go out walking in the neighborhood?" Her son said, "Mom, it is not the paleness of your legs that I would worry about if I were you." He said, "It's the hail damage on your thighs." You got it too, huh? Yeah, I know. If we're going to have great days, we've got to take a little heat sometimes and figure out how to laugh at ourselves. So, you want to have more great days? You can have them. It's not really so much about circumstances and what happens to us, but it is about the choices that we make and the actions that we take. We got to realize that, hey, you know what? Sometimes life is just not fair. And sometimes short-term problems get in the way of our long-term goals, and change comes along. And it's not what we had planned. We hadn't planned to be like this at this point in our lives. We have to realize that we can't whine or complain because it does absolutely no good and it annoys everyone. We have to be very grateful and appreciative. To not whine, to not live in denial, to be grateful, and occasionally to laugh at ourselves.